You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. Took a show off for Christmas. We're back. Sox in the Basement.
Yeah, there's no reason to stick coal in everybody's stocking by talking about the White Sox on Christmas Day.
I mean, it's a little different than New Year's. I think we might do a show next week that would come out on New Year's, because I think people do New Year's differently than Christmas. Like, everybody does Christmas. Not everybody does New Year's. Like, yeah, there's a certain group of people that are going to go out and spend way too much money to get that open bar where the crowd's going to be so deep, they're really not going to get very many drinks. They're going to be sick by the end of the night. They're going to be out till 3 a.m. They're going to be a disaster on that day. It's amateur hour. New Year's is a mess. I'm too old for that. I'm not interested in that. I would imagine a lot of our fan base, New Year's Day is going to be like any other day, like how U2 once sung about it. Nothing changes on New Year's Day. Like, I think that a show on New Year's Day is perfectly fine, but Christmas didn't make very much sense.
No, I mean, New Year's Day, like you said, it's one of two things. It's either a raging train wreck, in which case the White Sox fit in, or it's a day of rest and a day of reflection and it's kind of that last day that you can sit there and take a breath because the whole world is shut down.
Not everything's dead, though, you know? I mean, a lot of people get things done this time of year. They got a little time off of work. The world is slowed down. They're looking at their house. They're saying, I need new windows. I need new doors, patio doors, storm doors, exterior windows, all of that at Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. They don't come to you with a dingy example. You go to their big, beautiful showroom, ask whatever question you want, as everything you could possibly imagine for your home is right there for you to look at. No pictures in a book. Owner in showroom and on site during install with all Window and Door Superstore installers. They do not farm out the work. For 40 years, in Oak Forest since 1985, with all major brands custom made and no stock items for a perfect fit. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest is a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. Cam Boozer's interesting.
He is, actually. It was an interesting little trade, I suppose.
Well, here's a guy who's a journeyman, and he bounces around his entire career to all these different levels in the minors, and he's basically a career minor leaguer. Until last year, when he gets up to the majors finally in his year 32 season, and he makes it to Boston with a 338 ERA, a 1.336 whip, which is not good for a relief pitcher. He's a left-handed relief pitcher. If Loogie still existed, then maybe there's a reason for him. It's strange to me because you got to think that Brian Bannister sees something in this guy that really is expendable to the Red Sox. You don't have to give up basically anything for him. You're bringing him in. He's not really part of the future. He's not like a guy you're going to keep around, you're building around. So it's like, we just need another left-handed arm. This is a very low cost. We think there might be something there. And heck, if the thing we think we might be able to unlock is unlocked, suddenly he might be a piece when somebody's looking for a lefty reliever halfway through the season. Like, that's what he is.
That's just it, right? He becomes something that is an asset to a major league team. He's actually controllable because, control has nothing to do with age. It has to do with service time in the majors. And so he's under control for a number of years because he's only just been a rookie. And what you give up is you give up a 17-year-old pitcher who might turn into something and might not. And I did see, at least one headline on this trade where it's like, in a questionable turn of turning on the youth movement, the White Sox acquired an aging relief pitcher, and it's like, well, that's not what happened.
His path is so interesting, though. Have you looked at his path? He comes from Oregon State. At 21 years old, he's in the Twins Gulf League rookie ball. That's where he's playing, right? At 21. His 25-year-old season in 2017 looks like it's his last. He doesn't play again until 2021 when he becomes a member of the Chicago Dogs in Rosemont. Like, that's where he comes back.
So he's been a dog. He's been a Chicago dog.
Right, but he comes back in the independent baseball league after never getting above A-ball. He stays in A-ball 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 years of age. He can't get out of A-ball with Minnesota. So they basically were like, yeah, you're done. And then he's out of baseball. He goes to Chicago. He's with the River Dogs. The next year, he splits time between Lancaster, which is another independent league baseball team, and Double-A Amarillo, which is Arizona. And then he's with Boston in their Triple-A Double-A. He spends some time in Double-A, goes to Triple-A in 2023 and 24. Like, here's a guy who is out of baseball, couldn't figure it out, goes and plays indie league ball, and then somehow ends up in the Red Sox system and accelerates up through AAA and into the majors in his 30s after failing in his 20s. He's such an interesting baseball card to look at. Like, that's baseball right there. If anything, you're gonna kind of watch Cam Boozer just because that guy's like something out of like Field of Dreams. Like, he's Moonlight Graham, and he's getting an opportunity now all of a sudden.
He's got the excellent mustache. He's got the big handlebar going.
Yeah.
So, you got to love that. And it is, sometimes it's good just to have an interesting story. And sometimes it's good just to, like I said, sit here and say, well, you know what, if what he showed in the majors is real, and if there's something that Brian Bannister sees that he thinks he can further unlock and make him even more effective, then he's an asset. It's not unlike, now this didn't work out, but remember, as part of the Dylan Cease trade, they brought back Steven Wilson, who up to that point, even though he was an old rookie when he first came up with the Padres, had been relatively effective as a middle reliever. And the thought was he's a controllable relief pitcher that you could flip at the deadline. Now, Wilson had his worst season by far with the White Sox and had injuries. So you just kind of hope that doesn't happen. But like you said, what's the risk here? What's the risk in sitting there saying, I'm going to take on this left-handed pitcher who's an interesting story, and
he may not even make the team.
He may not even make the team.
He's just an arm. He's an arm that you're bringing in, but his story is interesting. He'll be one of those guys that when his story comes out, it'll be interesting. I mean, this is another one, like how Sox social media did the thing where they were introducing a player that you didn't even like know anything about. He would be another one. Like that'll be the interesting thing about this team this year. There's a few names that I'm kind of watching and saying, okay, let's see if they could take the next step. You've heard me bring up Lenin Sosa so many times. It's probably making you sick because he's going to come out and fall flat on his face and I'm going to sound like a moron. But I really love the end of his season last year when he got consistency. So I'm kind of watching him. Like, I'm watching him more than I'm watching Andrew Vaughn because I think the team has made a terrible mistake giving him $6 million and putting him into the lineup. I would love for him to prove me wrong. But I mean, like, there's things like that you're watching, but you're also going to have these very interesting stories like guys like Cam Boozer. Now, you will probably never see Corey Jokes again because he was DFA'd, which I did not see coming. I kind of thought they would like keep him around a little bit. Now, that's a pending designation for assignment, according to Fangraphs. But Corey Jokes quietly, during the holiday season here, I didn't even notice it until today, was DFA'd. So they continue to kind of go, you're not part of the plans. You're not part of the plans. We're going to kind of keep you around. We're going to kind of watch what you do. And they continue to do this little tinkering, which makes sense if you're not out there going after the big name free agents during the holidays.
Corey Jolk's not a young guy. I mean, he's pushing 30 himself. He's 28 last year. And, his major league stats aren't all that impressive at .234 batting average, an OPS of .625. For a bigger guy, he's not a base stealing threat necessarily. I mean, he's stolen a few, 20 in his 159 games.
But they took a look.
He's played at the major league level, but they took a look, and he was another harmless pickup to sit there and go, okay, well, this guy once upon a time had some pedigree. He had some spark as a potential prospect and a major leaguer. And now you sit there and you go, okay, well, we've seen all we need to see. And he's, like you said, he just becomes not part of the plan. So Corey Jolks is free to go and do something else. And maybe he becomes a River Dog and comes back in 5 years.
Sox in the Basement listeners, is it time to switch to a new age of life? Keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living and do it with Hyatt Home Medical Equipment's assistance. Make it so they can get around on their own and live independently. Hyatt has stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, and even bathroom remodeling. And they work with insurance. They have 0% financing as well for qualified individuals. If you use a CPAP machine and you're unhappy with your vendor, switch now. Get supplies directly mailed to you. You can also test out the newest machines in their showroom. They also have the latest and greatest in continuous glucose monitors. See it all, everything they have to offer. Hyatt Home Medical Equipment at hhme.com. The one thing that I saw that happened this week, towards the back half of the week, is the Tigers getting Gleyber Torres, which is a nice signing for them.
Hey, that's a good move for them, yeah.
But what they're doing is very interesting because it kind of mirrors something that I was yelling about that the White Sox should do. And that is taking a guy like Sosa, who I just mentioned, and I mention every show. And again, he's going to make me look stupid when the year starts and he's hitting 230. But taking a guy like him, or considering taking a guy like him and moving him to first base, because what has Andrew Vaughn done? And you look at the Tigers in your same division, not a very good team, but very forward thinking and trying to make things work. Supposedly, the reported plan that's out from all the beat reporters is that Colt Keith, who was the presumed second baseman, will move from that position and stand at first. And Spencer Torkelson, who is basically coming to baseball with a similar pedigree, drafted in a similar spot, had a similar amount of time in the majors as Andrew Vaughn, and had similar results, doesn't really have a defined role anymore because of that move. And like, there's a team that's like, you know what? We got a guy here in Keith who can hit, and we can put anybody at first base because now we're going to go out and get Torres. And that's the kind of move that you hope and you wait for this team to make. The Vaughn thing is so interesting to me because we just mentioned Jokes. That's a guy who's acquired by a young GM in a deal where he could have held on to him longer because he's one of his guys. That's something we always saw Hahn and Williams do. They held on to their guys that they acquired, that they drafted, that they for some reason had some sort of connection to a little bit too long. Where Getz is like, all right, well, I made a deal to get Jokes, and guess what? Didn't work, and we're moving on because I don't see anything there. We gave him enough time. He ain't the guy, and I've talked to my consortium of advisors. They've all taken a look at the tape, and there's no reason to keep him here on the 40-man roster. So you see that with every player except for Andrew Vaughn. And we talked about this on a recent episode, that it may be the intangibles. It may be the fact that he didn't give up when everybody else, including Luis Robert Jr., was giving up at the end of that season. And that may be the reason why he's still on this team.
To further the discussion about Torkelson versus Vaughn, one of the things that the Tigers were willing to do after they handed Spencer Torkelson the first base job and said, this is yours, and you can fight through your struggles in the majors, they eventually sent him down and just said, fix this. And when he came back from the minors, he was better, right? But he still never showed them enough for them to sit there and say, you have earned your spot, and we're going to continue to let you try and figure this out. And that's what the White Sox have done with Vaughn, is continue to try and figure this out. Because if this is all he is, he's not worth it then, because he's really just very replaceable. I mean, he's not even replacement level at that point. And if there is something more, then you sit there and you go, yeah, but why is it taking this guy so long to figure it out? Because he's not a young guy anymore. Nobody from Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams' core is young at this point. They're all veterans. They're all guys who have aged, and a lot of them have aged poorly, which is why Yohan Moncada is still sitting out there in free agency. It's why Eloy Jimenez is getting a minor league deal from the Rays instead of getting a major league contract, because his career has aged poorly. And it's why Dylan Cease might be on the move again too, even though he's done well for the Padres. He's also not considered to be, the guy. He's just really, really good. So he becomes somebody that gets moved for other assets. So you look at what that is, and you do wonder what it is that Andrew Vaughn has that keeps him here when, Getz has moved. I mean, I feel like he moved on from Dominic Fletcher. I feel like he's moved on from Corey Julks. I'm not saying that Fletcher is not DFA'd, but he's not guaranteed anything.
Oh, he's a backup outfielder right now. He's a backup outfielder right now and needs to have a big spring.
He's a guy fighting for a roster spot.
Yeah, he has to have a big spring, and he has to show that he can hit. I mean, he can play defense, but he's got to show that he's able to produce with the bat, or he won't even make this team. A guy who's probably going to make the team, and it's interesting, article just came out from Scott Merkin at MLB.com. Merck's been on the show a lot, and I haven't had him on in a while. Maybe we'll get him on here early on in the new year to kind of talk about some of the stuff.
Yeah, it might be a good idea.
But a lot of quotes from Edgar Quero. I know that we're all sitting around trying to figure out, is he really going to be here to start the year? And how much of the 2025 season are we going to see this high-end catching prospect that's been tearing it up with his bat down in the minor leagues? And if you listen to the quotes or in your head as you read the article, I think Edgar Quero's convinced he's coming here. I think he's convinced he's playing the whole year here. So whatever conversations he's had, this is how he talks about the big league team. in this article. Quote, this team is going to compete this year for sure. We're going to compete because of the young talent, the young players. They are hungry. We are hungry. Everybody is hungry to play baseball at the big league level. This is the point when you're hungry, you're going to do it. It doesn't matter who is coming to the box or who's going to throw. We're going to do it together. We're hungry, and everybody knows it. I mean, the guy's talking like he's on the major league roster, and he talks about looking forward to getting to know a new group of guys and talking ball with them in 2025. This guy's had a conversation. He's a part of the mix. That's how I read that. Okay. Right. When Merck is interviewing him, he's the main focus of an article talking about the young White Sox coming. And he throws out, we don't know if Benintendi is still going to be on the team. We don't know if Robert Jr. is going to be on the team. They might get traded. We don't know what they're going to do. They've brought in guys that are just basically structure veterans because they want to let the young guys get a chance to play. They're making decisions on certain players and who's going to make it there. And the thing really features him. It doesn't feature Montgomery. He gets mentioned. Colson Montgomery gets mentioned. And I do think that he's going to be given every opportunity to be the starting shortstop based upon Chris Getz's comments. But Edgar Quero, when I read that article, I go, somebody sat that young man down and said, we're planning on seeing you. Be ready.
And I wonder in what capacity, too, because when you think about what they have, they have, I'm not worried about Matt Thies as a backup catcher. I'm wondering where they view Corey Lee. Do they view him more as a backup or as a starter because of the defensive prowess? He's not exactly an automatic out with the bat, but he could be better. They have Kyle Teal, and I've heard some folks, some rumblings and rumors, and just I don't remember where I read it specifically, but talk about maybe Kyle Teal's changing his position. But I wonder if Edgar Quero, given how wide open things are, I wonder if there's talk of him changing position, because I've always been under the impression that the club was not exactly happy with his defense behind the plate. Like he's okay.
Right.
He's good enough. His bat would carry him through. But you kind of wonder if Chris Getz would sit there and say, well, I'd rather have somebody who's defensive minded behind the plate, and Teal's the better defensive catcher, and Corey Lee is a lot better than Edgar Quero.
A lot of Major League Baseball teams in recent years have taken their high-end catching prospects and brought them to the majors not as catchers. And they let them try to figure out the hitting angle before they're calling games. And you keep looking at like the lineup right now, like the projected lineup on Fangraphs basically has DH open. Like it's like, well, maybe Zach DeLoach. Like, I mean, like,
I was going to say, isn't it Zach DeLoach sitting in Fangraphs right now?
There's no DH. Now, a lot of teams have taken their guys and put them in the outfield. Like William Contreras is a hell of a catcher, but he played mostly outfield when he got up to the majors because they wanted him to focus on his hitting. He needed to get ready at that next step. They didn't want to lose the offense. Then he becomes a catcher. Then he gets traded to the Brewers. Now he's one of the top catchers in baseball. Like this is something that has happened with a lot of teams out there, and sometimes it doesn't work out. The guy, like who do the Pirates have? Henry Davis. Their big catcher was Henry Davis, and they tried the same thing. They tried to bring him up and put him in the outfield because they wanted to see if the bat would play. Now the bat didn't play. They got Joey Bart, like to have a renaissance to his career. He's probably really their catcher now.
And they had another catcher that was
Endy Rodriguez,
yeah. Who was also who if he hadn't been hurt would have been in the mix for the starting catcher too.
But that's the thing, like these catchers get put in different positions when they first come up. This is becoming like Francisco Alvarez. I want to say that the Mets did that for him for a little bit. Like there's a lot of catchers that it's like go play the outfield in the corner or stand at first base. And in the White Sox case, it might be designated hitter just to get used to hitting first before we put you behind the plate. And that may explain going out and getting another catcher in Thies, because that didn't make a lot of sense with Corey Lee. Why do you need to go get Matt Thies? But now, if that's the plan, if it is to start the season off getting Quero at bats at the major league level, because you're not really competing as much as Edgar Quero wants to believe that hunger will get them a division. You're not really competing for anything this year. And it's not like you're going out and getting the big bat. Is that the plan, to leave a spot open to let their high-end prospect who hits well just come up and focus on hitting before we move him behind the plate or find his permanent position at the major league level?
Well, and also not just for this year with Thies, but again, the acquisition of Kyle Teal, you wonder what that's about, because the Red Sox made it clear they were not giving up Roman Anthony or Marcelo Mayer or Kristen Campbell, but to get their fourth member of the big four, Kyle Teal, there, you don't necessarily acquire a guy with the intention of putting him somewhere else, especially if it's a niche position like catcher, and especially because Teal's not a bad catcher. I mean, there's some questions about his defense. There's some question about Corey Lee's defense.
There's
too,
questions about every catcher's defense in the minor leagues.
Nobody is perfect at framing. Nobody has perfect pop times. Nobody calls a perfect game every time out when you're, especially at the minor league level. It's something that's earned and learned at the major league level. But you would kind of figure that of those three, if you're sitting there going, well, Lee, and we know Lee's got elite times, that pop time for him and him throwing guys out, he's the best of the three. Teal's not bad. Quero's okay. When it comes to framing, Teal can frame. Corey Lee, not a great framer. Quero, it's just okay. Teal can move around behind the plate. Quero can move around behind the plate. Lee can move around behind the plate. You've got sort of all these things. And if you don't trust Quero or Teal at this point to call a game, but Corey Lee's had a year in the majors, you do kind of look at it and sit there and go, well, is Edgar Quero's future, because the bat is so important and because you have another one of your top prospects now behind him who is a little bit better defensively at the same position and is ultimately going to take it from Corey Lee at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if we come to find out that Quero's position change would be considered to be a permanent thing. But I do think the DH thing will be where he goes this year, because why would you bother having him worry about fielding at all when you can just throw him up there and say, just go hit, and then we'll get your reps in the bullpen. We'll get your reps in on side days. We'll get your reps in and help work on your catching still at this level.
Well, and I don't think that wherever he is this year indicates what his long term is, and they don't need to do that, because again, and if people aren't following what I'm saying here about bringing up like a star catching prospect and not making him a catcher right away, and the fact that other teams are doing this, you have to think about when you're jumping from AAA to the majors, that's the biggest jump. Everybody talks about that. It's not the same as going from AA to AAA or single A to AA. That's the big jump. That's why a lot of guys can't do it, no matter what their pedigree is, and they become a replacement level first baseman like Andrew Vaughn. That happens to people. So with a catcher, the catcher has to learn a major league staff, the pace of the major league game, and there's a lot more that he needs to concentrate on that, let's say, a left fielder doesn't have to when he makes that jump. But there's a big learning curve for catchers defensively and playing that position and the amount of responsibility on them. Plus, you have a young pitching staff, right? You don't want to hamper any of their development because Quero is sitting there trying to figure it out. You don't want to do that.
No.
But what you can do first is get him used to hitting. You can help him make that jump from AAA to the majors with the bat, and every once in a while have him catch a game on a Sunday, And that'll be really the indicator. If he never gets behind the plate, if there's never any time in the first couple of months where he's up where they go, you know what, kid, go catch a game. We're just kind of curious today, right? After the bat is starting to play or something like that. If they don't do that, then that means they're never putting him there. But I think that's what you'll see. I think what you'll see is you'll see him not be a catcher when he first gets here. A lot of questions about it. And Chris Getz and everybody else around the team kind of playing coy, like, hey, we want to keep our options open. And the same thing may happen with Teal as well. Because let's say Quero hits really well, and then they put him behind the plate, and they're like, wow, we got something going here. They may adjust Teal the same way, and then Teal may come in and take Quero's job. Like, it's weird because you don't normally see teams with multiple catchers that could all end up being the focal point for the future. This goes back to what I always talk about. Like, I wish they would just collect shortstops because you can move them anywhere. And instead, what we seem to do a lot as a team, the last regime collected first baseman and left fielders. First baseman and left fielders. That's what they did.
Which basically are the two worst positions. Like, that's where you stick your worst fielders.
Right. And in reality, you could put anybody at those positions if you really want to. That's what you really could do. And now this group, for some strange reason, has really fallen in love with catcher. And that's fine, because they're gonna be good at that position. Like, if you asked me, where do I feel most comfortable of all the positions on the field that the White Sox are going to be good at for many years, I might say catcher, because I don't know how long Luis Robert Jr. is going to be around in center field. I'm not sure what they're going to do with him, especially after last season and how he completely fell off the face of the earth. And I don't really know enough about everybody else out there to believe in them. But I know you have catching depth that's young and highly touted that people believe in. I would love to see Colson Montgomery show up and be a star at short. And even if he eventually becomes a third baseman, who cares? Wherever he actually ends up long term, who cares? That's one of the other stories that I'm watching. But I'm very confident that between Quero and Teal and even the attitude and the defensive know-how of Corey Lee and what he seemed to bring to the team last year. I mean, remember during the Pedro stuff, he was one of the more vocal guys.
Well, and that was one of your team leaders, as far as we were concerned.
Corey Lee quickly became a team leader, and everybody was like, why is this rookie talking? And it was like, because nobody on that team is a leader. Like, they don't have any. So, I mean, like, when you look back at it, you go, like, there's another guy. So I kind of like their catching situation right now. I mean, if they don't find a really good everyday starting catcher that you're considering clicking the box next to their name on the all-star ballot in future years, I'll be disappointed because it feels like they have a position of strength there. Time now for the Sox Nerd, Dave Marin, who puts all those tidbits and trivia nuggets up on the board at the rate, and he's with us on Sox in the Basement each and every week, brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience the downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore. Check out the big fat tire race and 10K trail run at the Forge coming up on January the 4th. The brand new Lamont Unlocked podcast coming in January 2025, produced by this studio, and so much more at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, here are some nuggets on the players the White Sox have picked up after the Garrett Crochet blockbuster. The first move the Sox made after the winter meetings was the signing of free agent pitcher Dan Altavilla. The righty is definitely on the comeback trail. His 5 games for the 2024 Royals were his first big league appearances since 2021. However, the native of Pennsylvania is coming off a sterling run with USA Baseball. Altavilla posted a 1.69 ERA in 5 appearances, allowing just 1 hit and 1 run in 5 1/3 innings in the Premier 12 tournament in Tokyo last month. According to the USA Baseball report on the game, Altavilla finished off the bronze medal win over Venezuela with a strikeout on a 97-mile-an-hour heater. A native of McKeesport, Altavilla could become the first Pennsylvanian to pitch for the Sox since Brian Omogrosso in 2013. Believe it or not, Chris, a fan in a number 48 Omogrosso jersey is a frequent visitor to the section right below me at the rate. 4 days after signing Altavilla, the Sox acquired Matt Thaiss from the Cubs for cash. This marked the first time the Sox bought a player from the Cubs since late in the 1972 season when they landed reliever Phil Regan. For a former first-rounder who's been kind of a bust, Thaiss has had some monumental accomplishments. For one, he was the first Angel to log 5 RBIs and 2 steals in a game. He did that last July 30th against Colorado. That July 30th game made he and Hall of Famer Mickey Cochran, who did it on August 9th, 1934, as the only catchers in big league history with at least 5 RBIs and 2 steals in a contest. Pitcher Bryce Wilson, signed on December 18th, fared much better as a reliever than he did as a starter for the 2024 Brewers. In 9 starts, he was 0-2 with a 4.75 ERA and 1.4 WHIP, while he was 5-2 with a 3.57 ERA and 1.1 WHIP in 25 relief appearances. For his career, Wilson's ERA as a starter is 5.37, while that number reads 3.57 in relief. Cam Boozer, acquired from Boston December 21st, will become the first Chicago Dog to play for the White Sox should he make the team. The lefty resumed his pro career with the Independent League team based in Rosemont in 2021 after a 4-year hiatus. 3 years later, he was pitching for Boston, where he logged his first and to date only big league save on June 9th, 2024 at the rate. Before I get to my zinger, I remind you that gems like these and long-form pieces are on my blog, which you can link to at soxinthebasement.com. My zinger, Ricky Henderson passed away last week. He had a lengthy and productive career as the greatest base stealer and leadoff man in big league history. How long was his career? Well, the first Sox catcher he ran on was Mike Colburn on September 7, 1979. The last Sox catcher he ran on was Mark Johnson on May 30th, 2000. Oh, and Ricky was the first postseason batter in the history of the Sox current home. That happened when he was with Toronto in Game 1 of the 1993 ALCS. That's it, Chris. More than you probably wanted to know about the new guys, Mickey Cochran and Ricky Henderson. Happy New Year, everybody.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always on soxinthebasement.com.